Hello and welcome back to Lesson 8 of Informative Writing Workshop. All right, so we're going to get started on our handout, which should be slide 3. And we're going to start, like usual, with review. So as a review, we review this every week because it's important to remember what we learned and match it with what we're already learning. So every time we have class together, I want to make sure that everybody knows that writing quality matters to God, because there are a lot of people who don't think it matters that much. It's not that big of a deal, but it is, because it reflects who God is, his excellence, his virtuousness, his praiseworthiness. And those are the things that we can and want to emulate. The next one is writing helps organize your thoughts. And this is also important because some people don't actually know the value of writing, but it does help you organize your thoughts. Good writing takes time and practice. Even if you don't like writing, it's important that you learn how to write well and that you have an understanding of how to clear your thoughts in a sense. And so start simple and grow over time, and you're going to get better and better. The next one says there is order in language. So there is a certain way that we should write so that it makes sense and helps the reader understand what we're trying to say. And this is very important too, because when we're going to get into this lesson, it's going to be easy to get confused sometimes when writing. So there's order, and clarity is very important. All right, making connections between ideas makes them more compelling. And so this has to do with our transition words that I taught you about, using transition words to connect all of our thoughts. And then last week we talked about details help bring our topic to life. Now we're going to move on to the principle for today's lesson. So our topic is figurative language. Sometimes it's called figures of speech, and we're going to see exactly what that is. But my first principle about that, related to God's principle of individuality, as we always do, is that God created language to be complex or complex. So sometimes sometimes reading can be hard to learn because it is complex. God intends it to be complex because that's how he is. That's his individuality. He is a complex being, and he created us to understand things in a complex way. So don't resist complexity. Embrace it and take it one step at a time. So in my first explanation under that principle, it says God created us to understand concepts literally and figuratively. So these are two ways that thoughts or ideas can be designated as complex. You have literally what's been said, what's been written. That's what you could base your thoughts on, but also figuratively. And we're going to talk about that, but it's not always obvious what someone's trying to say. Sometimes they use words in ways that don't actually mean what you might think they mean. So that's what we're talking about today. But God created that process. He created the complexity. The next point in this principle is God made our brains to be multi-dimensional. So, we've heard of 3D movies where they come out, instead of just seeing a movie from left to right or up and down, we can also experience movies in 3D. Our real life is 3D because we have that multi-dimension. But in our thoughts and in our brains, we have the concrete and the abstract. So concrete is things that you can actually touch. So I can touch my shirt, I can touch my phone, I can touch my computer, I can touch my glasses, my hair, my nose, different things like that. Those are concrete. You can touch them. Then there's abstract. Abstract are things you cannot touch. You can't touch love. You can't touch wisdom. It doesn't have physical characteristics. It's just something that's in our mind. And that abstract ideas are things that children don't understand because their brains haven't developed quite enough to understand the totality of abstract ideas. But around the age of maybe 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, especially in the middle school years, in your teen years, that's when abstract ideas make more sense. So those are some of the complexities there. And then my next point is complex language reveals God's mind, his glory, and the depth of his love. So God's mind is complex. So when we understand complex language, we understand God better. And then it shows his glory, how amazing he is and how amazing he thinks, and the depth of his love, because he will do complex things and abstract things to get our attention and really try to connect with us on that level. The next point, knowing how to think literally and figuratively helps us understand God better. And that's the same thing I've been saying. The more you understand complexity of thought, the more you can understand God. And then last point on the individuality is the Bible is filled with figurative language. In Psalm 18:2, it says, "The Lord is my rock." Does that mean that God is an actual rock? No. It means that he is strong and stable, because that's what rocks are. So that's how we interpret that. And then John 15:1 says that Jesus is the vine. Does that mean he's an actual plant? No. It means that we can be connected with him and grow from him. So that's what that means. And then Matthew 5:14, you are the light of the world. So we are the light of the world. Does that mean we're a light bulb and we need to get plugged in the electrical socket to get energy or things like that to light up? No. It means that we can shine bright in people's lives by bringing them encouragement and hope. So those are all the thoughts related to God created language to be complex. And I just love this idea that God is complex, because it's like we're constantly trying to figure out more and more about God, and it never ends. The knowledge of God continues forever. All right, so then we move on to principle number 2, having to do with the Christian principle of self-government. And that is figurative language requires focus and reflection. If you're reading something and people are using figurative language, it doesn't come to you right away. I mean, some does if you're used to it, but at the beginning, figurative language takes, like, you have to really stop and think about what the writer is saying. So it can be challenging to understand. Figurative language is challenging to understand. Making the effort it takes to think about, understand, and use figurative language, it makes a person a sharp thinker. So if you can use figurative language, if you understand figurative language, and if you think about it, are able to think about it, then you have a sharp mind. That helps sharpen your mind. In Matthew chapter 13, verses 13 to 17, it talks about, Jesus is talking about how he says, people hear but don't understand. We have ears are concrete, but listening is something that we have to do not just with our ears. The voice and the sound waves that go in our ears, that's not enough. We have to use our mind to think about what we're hearing. But Jesus says people hear and they don't understand. Their hearts are dull. They're not sharp, like I was saying. And they miss out on some of the blessings of God because of their lack of ability to understand and to hear. So that's another reason why we want to focus and reflect on what we're reading and what we're thinking and what we're writing, because we want to be sharp. We don't want to be dull. And then the next point is we have to go beyond just hearing and seeing to use figurative language. And lastly, figurative language is powerful and can be used to make a point stronger. Skill. So the skill obviously is figures of speech, and figures of speech use words in a way that is different than their actual meaning. All right, so we're going to learn exactly what that is in just a second. The word figurative in the 1828 dictionary is an adjective to describe speech, or nouns. It describes nouns. And so the first part of the definition says representing something else, representing by resemblance, typical, to shadow out the true glory of a more divine sanctity. I just love that part of this definition, that Noah Webster found it important to include the divine and what is glorious in things that are represented and not just obvious. So I love that part. And the second definition is representing by resemblance, not literal or direct. A figurative expression is one in which the words are used in a sense different from that in which they are ordinarily used. And then 3, abounding with figures of speech. So here you can say, or here you can see that they call figurative language figures of speech. All right, so we're going to think about what ideas you want to represent through figurative language in your writing. And I'm going to teach you how to do that. You're going to plan one figure of speech per paragraph, and you're going to use at least 2 different types. So I'm going to teach you 4 different types of figurative language. You're going to use at least 2 of them, which means if you have 3 paragraphs, then 2 different ones, but 2 can use the same types of figurative language. And your assignment is to write 3 paragraphs about a great place to visit. And those 3 paragraphs have a very specific way that I want you to write about them. The first paragraph would be, what does your place look like? So this is where I want you to continue to use descriptive words. And then the second paragraph is what you can do there. You're going to continue to use descriptive words there. And then why it's a great place. So this will be more abstract ideas, but you're going to want to use 1 figurative language in each paragraph. I'm going to move on to slide 4, where I'll teach you all about the figurative language here. We have 4 types of figurative language. We have simile, metaphor, idiom, and hyperbole. If you don't know how to say this word, please practice how to say it correctly. You don't want to walk around not knowing how to say this correctly, because people won't know what you're talking about. And you don't want to build a bad habit of saying it wrong from the beginning. So hyperbole, hyperbole, hyperbole. All right. Normally the E at the end of a word is silent, but in this case, it's not. It's probably because this word is not English, but that's a lesson for another day. Okay, so let's talk about simile. Simile is a noun. All of these are nouns. In rhetoric, a comparison of 2 things which, however different in other aspects, have some strong point of resemblance in quality or character of a thing, must use the words like or as in the phrase. So when you use a simile, you have to use the word like or as. And I gave you 12 examples of how to use simile. So you could say she swims like a fish, he walks like a penguin, it is as old as my grandma, we are as smart as the teacher, they are flying like an eagle, the lake was like a mirror, it's as old as a dinosaur, and so forth and so on. Okay, so I put 2 circles in like a Venn diagram circles here because simile is comparing 2 things. So if you're talking about this great place that I want you to write about, then you're going to compare it with something else, not the whole place, but maybe one specific part of the place. Compare it to something else if you use simile. The next one is metaphor. That is a word a word expressing likeness, one thing representing another, having some resemblance, a name, an attribute, or an action characteristic of one object is assigned to another to which it is not literally applicable. So this is where you're going to compare 2 things. That's why I put the triangles with the equals. You're comparing 2 things, but you're not using the words like or as. Okay, so this one's a little more tricky. You're going to use the words more like is, was, are, or were. Those are the key words in a metaphor. And I didn't put that down because you don't have to use is, as, you don't have to use is, are, was, were, but it is common to use those words. So things like he is the cornerstone, it's talking about Jesus, or we are the salt of the earth, or she is an early bird. He thinks he is a clown. The event was a ray of hope, and so forth and so on. So you could read those examples. You could use my examples that I have here if you want, and if they fit in your essay. If they don't fit, then you might want to think of some other one that's all your own. So they don't have to be one of the ones I have here, or you could Google similes for kids or something like that, or metaphors for kids and get a lot more examples, and that's fine. But you could make up one on your own, or you can just use an example that you find on the internet or right here. Okay, now let's move on to idiom. A mode of expression peculiar to a language or nation, the choice of words that cannot be understood by the meaning of the separate words, but must be learned as a whole. Now this one's a little bit harder, but basically an idiom is a saying. Okay. Yeah, so idioms are a piece of cake because idioms, you definitely have to use an example that's here in my handout, or search one online that you like, because idioms are very specific words grouped together that mean something different than what the actual words are. So in the example, the early bird gets the worm. Does that mean all birds who are the first to get up or get up at a certain hour get worms? No, it just means that if you're going to be motivated enough to get up early, then you're going to be able to accomplish a lot more than someone who stays in bed and wakes up late. That's what that one means. Then number 2 says, you are pulling my leg. That means you're joking with me. Okay, so if you use that one, you know, you would be talking about something that's a joke. Number 3, it was the best of both worlds. That means both things were great. Now that would be a good one to talk about a certain place. Talk about 2 different places or 2 different parts of the place that you're going to be talking about. Number 4, the climb was a piece of cake. That means it was easy. Number 5, we found ourselves in a pickle. That means it wasn't easy to get out and we got stuck somewhere. So yeah, you can read the rest of these. You can search more online. That's fine. But if you want to use an idiom in your essay, then make sure it fits in with what you're describing or talking about. Then we have hyperbole. Everybody say hyperbole again. Hyperbole, 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 because that's going to be important to say it right, as I've already said. The definition of hyperbole is, in rhetoric, a figure of speech which expresses much more or less than the truth, or which represents things much greater or less, better or worse than they really are, an exaggeration of an idea. So basically, a hyperbole is an exaggeration. So for the examples I put, it was in the middle of nowhere. Now, this would be perfect to talk about a certain place if it's far from a crowded city or something like that. The walk takes forever. That's exaggerating. The walk doesn't actually take the rest of your life or eternity to do. The exercise was killing me. It doesn't actually kill you. It just is really hard. People got cold feet. Did their feet actually get cold? No, it just means they were nervous. They could eat a horse. Were they actually eating a horse? No. So different sentences like this. Now, hyperboles are not set. You could use my examples here, or you could use examples that you find on the internet. But basically, it's just telling it in a way that's like unreasonable. Like it can't possibly be killing you, actually killing you. No. So the ones that I underline in sentences 1 through 4 are common ways to express hyperbole. So that's why I did that. They're like exaggerations. I underline number 8. I'm dying of laughter. Are you really going to die if you're laughing? No. It's an exaggeration that you're just laughing a lot. And then number 10, it weighs a ton. So ton expresses like, oh, it's so heavy. But does it really weigh 2,000 pounds or however much a ton is? Her smile was a mile wide. Like, really? Can you drive on her smile? Was it that long? No. So different words that express these big, huge things or really super small things, or things that exaggerate. So I hope that makes sense. As a repeat, your assignment is to write 3 paragraphs about a great place to visit. Your first paragraph is going to be about what it looks like. Your second paragraph is going to be what you can do there. And the third paragraph is why it's a great place. You're going to continue to use transition words because we're building on our paragraph. So don't forget about transition words. Go back to lesson 6 and look up transition words. We're going to use descriptive words. So try to look at all the nouns in your paragraph and go back and see if you can add some adjectives or descriptive words there. And then you're going to make sure that you have at least 1 figurative language in each of your paragraphs. So you'll have a total of 3 figurative languages in the whole essay. All right. So that's it for lesson 8, figurative language. I look forward to reading what you write, and I'm signing off until next time.